Okay, it is 6 o'clock. And I am calling the March 24th, 2025 Select Board meeting to order. I'll begin with a roll call. Mark, would you?
Yep, I'm just making sure I'm on mute. Okay.
Are you? Good.
Note Ms. Ackerman is absent. Ms. Hartman?
Here.
Myself, I'm here. Mr. McKenna?
Here.
And Ms. Ravelli?
Here.
Thank you.
We preside over public comment, please.
Yeah, the Select Board will take public comments for the next 15 minutes. If you're in the audience, please approach the podium, begin with your name. And if you're on Zoom, use the raise hand feature. We'll recognize you. Public comment is for up to 3 minutes for items that are not scheduled for action on the agenda. Any public comment? Please.
Yes, hi, I'm Jim Jackson. I live at 44 Old Marlborough Road. And I'd like to take a moment to discuss warrant Article 46, which is a citizen's petition about a zoning bylaw amendment for a continuing care community overlay district. When the hospital sold the property to Newbury Court, I'm one of the neighbors in that neighborhood. We knew they were going to develop an addition to the Newbury Court campus. I'm not here to oppose that development. What I am here to ask is the Select Board to not endorse this article as it is written. The way the article is written would allow Newbury Court to potentially, not saying they're going to, but build a building that is 85 feet tall within 40 feet of Ornac or Old Marlborough Road. That's a 6-story building. It also gives them the ability to build 2-story housing structures within 5 yards, 15 feet of the golf course or Old Marlborough or Ornac. I think the better way to proceed with a project of this scope, it is a very large development project for the town, would be for Newbury Court to present plans to the town and have an open discussion process. This is, again, a major development. It requires a zoning change, and we're being asked to make that change with no plans presented at all. We need assurance that the development facing Old Marlborough Road will be in scope with the existing neighborhood. And this petition, as it is written, doesn't provide those assurances at all. Thank you for your time.
Oh, I'd like to remind you that that's also going to be heard at the April 9th Planning Board hearing, so come back to that. Okay. Great.
Yeah, and the Select Board's not scheduled to take any action on that tonight.
Does the Select Board vote to approve or not approve any amendments as they go to town meeting?
The Select Board will recommend affirmative action or no action. And we get into that after we've gone through the hearing process and heard all of the public comments. And the article presenter has usually had an opportunity to refine their presentation as well. That's why we have the hearing. So just stay tuned.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? It's probably a good reminder of the general process for any article at this stage. Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. Seeing no public comments. Moving on to the consent agenda, I move that we...
Let's find out if people want to remove anything.
Is there anything? Okay.
Yeah, is there anything that people would like to remove from the consent agenda for consideration before we vote?
No.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. And I'm going to move affirmative that we approve the consent agenda with thanks to Voyager Publishing, the Council on Aging, Shelley and Metzenbaum and Steve Kellman, and the Concord Independent Battery for their gifts to the town for various things that are listed in our agenda. And also in this context, we have a special proclamation today for Fran Gardella, a centennial birthday.
Really?
Whereas Frances Merrill Gardella was born on April 4th, 1925, in her grandfather's parsonage in Leverett, Massachusetts. And whereas Frances married Ronald Gardella in March of 1947 and raised 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren, And whereas she has lived in 18 presidencies, the Great Depression, 2 world wars, the women's suffragette movement, the civil rights movement, and space travel, and whereas she served on the town's cable committee, was a 5-time president of the West Concord Women's Club, and a longtime delegate to the Massachusetts Federation of Women's Club. Now and therefore, we, the Select Board of the Town of Concord, wish her hearty congratulations and success in her long and fruitful life at aged 100.
Here, here.
Yes.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Thank you.
So, move to approve the consent?
I already moved.
You did?
Yep.
Yep.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Okay, we'll do the appointment?
Sure. Under Select Board appointments tonight, we move to reappoint Joseph Rogers of 20 Tracy Street to the Agricultural Committee as an associate member for a second term to expire April 30th, 2028.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you.
We are way ahead of schedule. Mr. Kenny? Yes. You want to talk to us about the independent battery? Please, at the podium, thank you.
First of all, thanks for having us tonight again, I should say again.
Yep.
I'd like to introduce a couple of folks that are with me today. Peter Mayette, who's the captain of the battery, and John Thompson, who's the current secretary, soon to be president-elect for next year, so his face will be familiar, I'm sure.
Right.
Really, our process today, and this is falling apart on me, but our process today is just to present the package that is required by the town every year as far as the battery's compliance with the contract that we have. I've addressed the schedule for the activities for the battery that we know of today, and like I said in the letter to Carrie, that as other events may pop up, and they do pop up from time to time, we'll come before the board to get approval through Carrie for approval to fire. And it does, like I say, happen from time to time. I would say the only one that's different from the town's normal activities this year, you'll notice is there is an activity at the Neshota Country Club,
Yeah.
which is to provide an honorary opening of a golf tournament there. That's for folds of honor, which I went up and looked it up, and it is interesting that that's yet another, which is good, very good, by the way. Another organization is there to provide funds not for disabled or wounded or lost veterans, but for their kids. And it provides scholarships for that. So we are going to go ahead and do that. Right now, it's scheduled for June at Neshota Country Club. So it's in town, so we should be okay with that. We'll have the fire department there and all of that necessary activities. And the balance of it is the litany of things that we provide each year for the town. I would just highlight to you that one issue that we will be updating from next year is based on the contract, the boroscope, which inspects the cannon every 5 years, is provided by the Department of Army, and we're due for that again next year, so you'll have that updated as well. Other than that, we got the 250 coming up, and it's very busy. As I said to all of our guys, I said, expect a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails over the next couple of weeks until we get things squared away. But we're in very good shape. We're prepared. We'll have a couple more training sessions between now and then we're ready to get going with the 19th.
Great.
So basically, that's where we're at right now. There's a big package, and I know Andrea's got all the details. We'll go from there.
It's in good shape. Do we have any
Yeah,
questions?
I do actually have one. I don't remember the flag presentation that happens. Can you just describe that for me?
So that flag presentation, that's part of what the gift to the town is. Just a little history in this, and thanks to our newest honored citizen, Sandy Smith, who was also a 50-year member of the battery.
Yeah.
He and I collaborated a little bit this last year, saying what can we as a battery do for the town of Concord? You know, we're a volunteer organization,
Yeah.
volunteer funds, volunteer everything, right? We don't have a lot of funds to be able to disperse, but we thought it was very important that we provided some recognition to the town from the battery. So Sandy actually came to me with the idea of a presentation of a new flag, a larger flag at the center of town for the town of Concord. And I believe, do you remember the
16 by 25.
Very good.
memorized, she's
Very-
memorized. And it's significantly bigger than the flag we
Really?
have today, and it's all approved by the town engineering group and all that stuff, so.
Great.
Permanent, that, the bigger flag will be permanent?
Permanent, as far as I understand, yeah. And I'll be honest with you, we didn't want anything to do with the approvals or anything like that. I said, the best we can do is we'll pay for it. Don't want to, I want the flag to last a little bit longer than that and be in the weather and all of that, right? So that is something that I wanted to do at the end of this, and then make sure that I gave to Carrie the check from the Concord Independent Battery, which is for a total of $689, which represents the total amount of the cost for the flag. It's already delivered, as far as I understand, and the fire department will test it to make sure we're good, and we'll go from there.
That's
We
great.
plan to do that on the 12th
Yeah.
of April. Yeah, 12th of April. We'll have our regularly scheduled test fire, the old Mance. We fire 6 to 8 rounds, and it's just, again, last round to go through it and make sure everything's okay. We'll go from there, and then at 11:30, we'll meet here at the flagpole. We'll present the flag to the town, and then we'll follow up with our Marion's Corner exercise at 1 o'clock.
Great.
Yeah.
Will the new flag be raised at
We're
that time?
hoping that's the case.
Good.
I do know that the fire department will test it beforehand to make sure we've got the right hooks and all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Good.
a strong enough rope.
Yeah. Well, the engineer says it's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
We took that for what
yeah,
it was worth. We ran with it, right?
good.
Okay, so that's where I'm at right now, and I would like to go ahead and present this check to Carrie, if I can.
Okay.
It's made out to the town 250 fund, which is what we're told to make it out to. Okay, thank you very much.
Oh,
And
thank
we're
you.
very happy to do that for the town. It's a good representation of the battery's contribution.
It's a
Perfect.
wonderful idea.
That's great. Thank you. That's great.
Okay.
Very good. Do we have a motion?
Yes, we do. Move to approve the 2025 Concord Independent Battery Compliance Package.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next thing on our agenda is to make some small changes to the 2025 annual town meeting warrant and the hearing schedule. The first change is on the warrant, on March 3rd, when we approved the order of the articles on the warrant, we're looking at 60 articles, and in fact, the warrant is 58 articles. I think Carmen's here to answer any questions. And in your packet, we have an explanation why it's gone from 60 to 58. One is a clerical error, a misinterpretation of 2 articles that should have been condensed into one, and the other is that CCRSD is withdrawing their request for the debt for the amenities building. So with that in mind, I would like to, first of all, answer any questions. Any clarifying
So,
questions?
yeah, so sorry, just to be clear, the second part you mentioned, they withdrew, I think it was
It's-
just for people listening, because there were 2 versions of the
Exactly.
same
Right.
thing. It was-
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
So
one
there is
was,
still one version
There's still
of
one
it.
version, yes.
one was under the region, and I think
Right.
this one's under the
Two,
town.
two
so-
two similar versions,
Right.
but not the same.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
so there is still one version, yes.
Okay.
No,
Any other
pretty
questions?
And
straightforward.
otherwise, it was just the changes in order that we talked about.
And we
Yes.
also, yes, and we can,
Right.
on March 3rd?
Yeah.
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 And since then, though, we've condensed one of those. Okay,
Yep.
so it goes from 60 to 58. Any questions?
No questions. It's
We
great.
need a motion.
Move to approve ratification of the warrant for town meeting, for 2025 annual town meeting as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then the second thing I need to discuss with you, this does not require a vote, but it's really information only, is a reordering of the articles that would be heard at the hearings. So if you look at, I think it's page 82 in your packet, you'll see that the warrants that were originally going to be heard at the FinCom hearing on the 10th have been moved to the 15th, and the articles that were going to be heard on the 15th have been moved up to the 10th. So we simply swapped the articles that were going to be heard, and the reason why is because two of those articles are CCRSD-related articles, and there is a meeting in Carlisle on April 10th. So the school committee requested that instead of having that meeting with the FinCom here in Concord on the 10th, they move it out into the 15th, so it would be after the hearing in Carlisle. So this is, and we've talked to the Finance Committee, they will accommodate this change. So again, this is information only, doesn't require a vote, but
Yeah.
I just want people to know that, and people in the community to know that the order of articles will change.
So just for clarity, will the version of the warrant that's up on the website be changed as well? Thank you.
And also, we got to the bridge in time to change it.
Oh, great.
Yes.
So we won't have,
So the bridge
That
will have the
confusion.
correct articles listed
Great.
on the appropriate hearing date. So
It's great.
that's good. That's good.
It's excellent.
So, okay, that was for information only. We're moving ahead. We're way ahead of schedule. Is the 250th committee ready to talk now, or do you want,
or do you?
I guess they're not, because they're not here.
Well, no, I think they're outdoors. I think they're outside.
They're
No, we
outs-
could do,
Yes, okay.
Karen's coming.
okay.
Gary, can you go now, or would you rather we wait until you were really scheduled on the,
We're good.
okay, good,
Good.
We're good.
okay,
Chief Mulcahy's going to join me,
good.
and I think everyone knows Captain Goldman is here as well.
Brian? Brian's there, yeah.
Yep.
You're right.
Careful.
Going to be even
Gary
more fun to
Clayton,
watch him get up.
31 Black Birch Lane, and co-chair of the Concord 250 Executive Committee. So I'm back again for what I suspect, what we're planning, this will be our final briefing for the Select Board. We've
Yes.
had quite a number of briefings with the board. I hope it's been helpful and informative for
Yep.
you. It's been helpful for us, I can tell you for sure. In a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Mulcahy for an update on public safety. That's our primary focus for this final briefing for you. I will mention a couple of points by way of highlight. We will have one other additional community public information forum. That'll be on Tuesday, April 1, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. That'll be in the main library in the Goodwin Forum.
Okay.
It's on the town's website, and we'll be circulating other notices about that. But that's primarily an opportunity to, again, continue to engage the public and focus on, I'll describe it as the logistics of what we're about to embark on. It's transportation, public safety, our volunteer ambassadors and the like. That's what we really want to focus on. So that's April 1 at 6 p.m. in the main library, Goodwin Forum. And then I'll just mention to you that we have been utilizing lots of digital media formats. We are also, as promised, producing a hard copy brochure, which we will be distributing widely about town. We'll have plenty at the Concord Depot as our visitors are disembarking from the trains or from shuttle buses and the like. And we'll be sharing these with local businesses, because it's one of the things they've asked for as well. Can we see something like this well before the 19th? So the answer is yes. So that's, I will send to you, and then you have or will receive shortly an update, and we'll continue to provide weekly updates on 250 programs and events. And I don't know if any of you had a chance to participate in this last weekend,
Yeah.
but it was
Very
busy.
nice.
It was very
And,
busy, yeah.
Very
It
busy.
was really exciting to see the number of
Yeah.
people engaged and the like, and we'll now, the pace quickens. So as the weeks unfold, again, we'll provide to the board and to the general public a digital format of upcoming programs and events for the upcoming week. So I will pass these around, if I may. Thank you, Megan. Send some over this way. Thank you. And let me turn it over now to Chief Mulcahy.
There'll be one.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Thanks for having us back here to update you on our plans for the 250th celebration, our large-scale event on Saturday, the 19th. So as we briefed you back in December, we mentioned the 10 working groups that we've been working with alongside NEMA, the Mass Emergency Management Agency. We've continued our planning with them. So I'll give you a high-level update. We obviously are here to ensure the safety and enjoyment of the residents, the businesses, VIPs, and all attendees and spectators that are here to join us on Saturday. The planning for this has been ongoing for about 2 years, involving municipal, county, state, and our federal public safety partners. The goal has been to develop a measured response that can be scaled up or down based on public safety intelligence and risks, or their absence. Careful consideration has been given to deploying only the necessary resources to achieve our mission and to avoid overstaffing the event. So our coordination among the 10 working groups that I had mentioned, they're all subject matter experts representing local, state, federal agencies, and they're facilitated by the Mass Emergency Management Agency. So they'll be at the table come game day, which is going to be the 19th at our UCC in Lexington. Our Emergency Operations Center will be stood up as well. And again, this is just to high level, ensure the safety of our residents, businesses, and spectators, provide security and transportation for dignitaries and VIPs who may be in town. We have heard that the governor and the lieutenant governor will most likely be in attendance. We have not heard back from Congresswoman Trahan, excuse me, not heard back from the Washington yet on a presidential dignitary or anyone from his administration. But we're prepared for potential threats and emergencies with a unified, coordinated response. We want to minimize the disruptions to the residents, the faith communities, and the local businesses. So our infrastructure, our personnel deployment, and this is again based on the expected crowd size. We have approximately 150 fire and enhanced EMS personnel expected on scene that day, approximately 200 police officers and traffic enforcement officers. Concord Public Works, their staff will supplement our operational needs with about 47 of their staff deployed. As far as communications equipment, radios, mobile devices, cells on wheels that I mentioned back in December, one has been deployed already and others are coming. So that'll be for real-time coordination with the UCC and the EOC. You'll notice that I mentioned back in December, there's going to be an outer perimeter and an inner perimeter. The outer perimeter obviously being along the Route 2 corridor, the inner perimeter around the parade route. So you'll notice that we're going to have commercial vehicle blockades at the key intersections surrounding the parade. Mm-hmm. So that's vital to the safety of every participant, anyone in the parade. Obviously, we're all aware of New Orleans and what took place down there, so we want to avoid anything like that. Mm-hmm. So EMS will be on hand, obviously, first aid stations and ambulances for any medical response that's required. The MBTA schedule has been adjusted for us for that day. So from North Station to Concord out to Acton and back, the trains will run hourly, with the last train leaving Concord at 9:44 after the drone show. Bikes will not be permitted on trains, and bike racks will be here in town for residents, and they've been donated by Pan Mass. Intercommunity transportation shuttle will be available to transport spectators to and from events from satellite parking locations, and it's been posted, but I'll go over them quickly. MCI Concord, Baker Ave, Verrill Farm at Wheeler Road, Plainfield, if they're available, Virginia Road at Middlesex Green, Gaining Ground, Virginia Road at the Spalding Building, and the Middlesex School. The drop-off locations are going to be at the Concord Museum, either on Lexington Road or Cambridge Turnpike. Concord resident pickup locations is 8 now. There may be a couple added, but I'll just quickly go through those. Old Bedford at Heritage, Edmonds Road, Willard School, Concord Middle School, the Concord Green, Concord Church Street at Harvey Wheeler, right outfield at Lawsbrook, Barrett's Mill at Strawberry Hill Road, and 314 Virginia Road, which I mentioned, Gaining Ground. All the resident pickup locations will be on-street, like school pickups for the children. The potential additional site locations, if manageable, if we can do it for safety reasons, are going to be Sudbury Road at Garfield, Main Street at Valley Sports, and then we'll have 3 buses reserved for emergency sheltering if needed. There'll be a Lincoln shuttle to go from the Lincoln Station with 1 stop on 126 at Walden Pond, and this shuttle drop-off will also be at the museum. So the inter-community bus shuttle from Concord to Lexington and Lexington to Concord will have stops along the way on Route 2A, including Minuteman National Park Visitor Center and the Hotwell Tavern parking lot on Route 2A. I mentioned earlier the inner and outer perimeters. Those will be clearly marked, and the outer perimeter will be staffed with state police as well as supplemented by our offices. I predominantly want our uniform officers down in the downtown area in the inner perimeter for our residents on the parade, surrounding the parade. Concord Transportation is going to provide shuttles to and from designated satellite parking areas, which I mentioned. Gary had mentioned there are 150 event ambassadors will be stationed at key locations. So they'll be at the Thoreau Street Depot and various locations. They'll be working with the transit police that we've brought in to assist us at the platform, as well as bus drop-offs at the museum. And they'll assist spectators with navigating the events and providing directions to attendees. First aid stations and medical tents will be at strategic points at the Hunt Gym, Kais Road, those locations. We have a clearly defined evacuation procedures. They'll be announced and implemented as needed. There'll be designated gathering points for large-scale emergencies. Those have been defined. One will be at the high school, at the Red Gym, and with the family reunification location if we need it. Public communication, we've been partnering with the 250th Communications team. Diane Proctor and Polly Meyer and her team have been fantastic. They're essential partners. They've been communicating timely updates via signage, getting information out on the town webpage, public announcements, social media, as well as Concord250.org. So our coordination with the agencies, we've been collaborating with our local agencies, which include Concord Police, the Fire Department, Public Works, all of town staff who have been fantastic with this, stepping up and really contributing to this plan, as well as the Middlesex Sheriff's Department, our NEMLEC mutual aid partners, Lincoln, Lexington, Arlington, Public Safety partners, and our National Park partners. On the state and federal level, we've been working with MEMA, as I've mentioned, the Mass Sheriff Association, who have provided resources and assets to us, the Commonwealth Fusion Center, Mass State Police, Boston Regional Intelligence Center, the FBI, Secret Service, and the Transit Police. So we have mutual aid agreements that are in place for the use of the parking lots around town, the facilities such as the high school, Alcott School, District Court, Minuteman High, where we're going to locate our UCC over in Lexington. And then the community engagement efforts, some of which Gary has mentioned. There's been several sessions and meetings with the business community. We've had 5. The League of Women Voters, we've had 1. Council on Aging, there's been 1 presentation. There's been an interfaith community. There's actually been 4 interfaith community meetings. And there's been at least 8 select board briefings to you. And Gary mentioned the upcoming executive committee scheduled for April 1st. Public service announcements, social media posts, local outreach via town web pages, and Concord Bridge has been ongoing. We've met with the Boston news stations. They've been given their parking locations. They'll be located at the Holy Family Parish. The Jumbotron is going to be located at the MSN Umbrella parking lot, and live streaming is going to be from the Harvey Wheeler Community Center and that'll provide residents access to the key events. The mobilization begins on April 18th at 6 PM. We're going to shut the roads down, and it's going to be a gradual shutdown completely overnight with the state police. And then we will have detailed schedules for staff shifts and operational periods and response protocols. We have committed to the community that we do intend to have everything open for services Sunday on Easter Sunday. So by 11 PM on Saturday night, we should be open, and we'll stick to that. We've worked with Public Works on a well-coordinated cleanup effort, again with the road closures reopening by 11 at the completion of the drone show. So we're going to keep everything locked down through the duration of the drone show, and then once that gets over, we'll start to systematically open roads. I just want to take a quick moment to thank Gary and Rob from the committee, Fred Ryan from the executive committee for all their help, and the town staff who's done an unbelievable job. Everybody's stepping up and really contributing to this. So if there are any questions for us, the captain and I are here to answer anything, any clarification points.
Great. Questions?
No, I think it's great. And I assume all this information that you just read off is all on the website, or if it's not, will be.
A lot of it is.
Yep.
Some of this is law enforcement sensitive. which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
not
yeah. No, that I
proposed,
understand.
a
But
lot
the
of
parking,
What I just
yeah.
read is out there, yeah.
Okay, great. I thought so. Thank you.
For residents that, say, occupy that zone between the inner and the outer perimeter, how should they think about coming and going on Friday night?
We will accommodate them as best we can, Mark.
Yeah.
There'll be credentialing in place, and
Mhm.
obviously, as they show their credentials, I think they're going out in a March mailing coming up.
Yeah. Okay,
And then they'll have those credentials, and then our staff will work with them at any intersection they come up to that they
okay.
want.
So residents should look out for that mailing.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Within the security zone,
yeah.
the residents within the security
Within
zone.
Yeah,
this-
okay.
Just great, thank you. Sounds very thorough. Any areas you're concerned about? Anything that's kind of not, feel like is not buttoned up and still needs some attention?
No, nothing like that. Obviously, we plan for the unknown. We're working with our tactical ops commanders. We never know, I mentioned back in December, something could happen, and we plan for that. We plan for a presidential visit. I spoke to the Secret Service last week on that, so we're coordinating with everyone, our local partners as well as our federal partners. So nothing that I'm really concerned about, but you never know.
Yeah,
So we're planning for that.
Thanks.
I have a few detailed questions. The Emergency Operations Center, that's going to be in town
That'll be at Public Safety.
at the
Building.
Public Safety Building? Okay.
Yep.
And you mentioned that bikes aren't going to be allowed on the trains?
Not on
Because
the
that's kind of
trains.
gone back and forth.
So I just heard today that now it's something else, but as far as the last I heard, bikes were not going to be allowed on those trains.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a
There was some
change.
confusion
Yeah, there
because
was.
the
Yeah.
city had posted, because their practice or normal service is to allow bicycles on trains, but for special event days,
Yep,
they do not.
okay,
Okay.
okay, just to be clear on that. And how often will the resident shuttles run? This-
Depending on the route, Cap, specifics on that?
It is gonna depend on the route
Okay,
to run.
roughly.
In terms of, depends on, we're still working with John Arena and Transportation to work out the routes.
Just the microphone picked up.
Yeah, good, good.
We're still working with John Arena on the transportation routes to just button those up. But the idea is with the number of buses they have,
Uh-huh.
to make those routes fairly short along with the pickup points. So some of the routes are run about every 15 minutes, maybe to a half an hour. It won't be drawn out. That's one thing we try to identify early on to keep things relatively close, especially here in town.
Okay, great. And you said you're also going to have plainclothes law officers here in town, right?
There will be, yes.
Okay. And can you tell us more about that ambassador program that you mentioned?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. So Court Booth,
Yep.
who's
Yeah.
volunteer or Community Participation Committee, stepped up to help us organize, recruit, orient, train, deploy primarily residents of Concord who wish to volunteer as volunteer ambassadors. They will be identified with a bright orange vest with the 250 logo on it, and they will be deployed in shifts, because we're talking about extended period of time. There's about 150 individuals right now that have stepped up for this. They're going through training, which includes a video that we've produced with the help of Middlesex Media. And they will be deployed at specific locations, typically street intersections, and will be responsible for that immediate area. Their responsibilities include, first and foremost, welcoming our guests, answering questions about where do I find the food trucks, where are the restrooms, et cetera. They are eyes and ears for us in this process and can effectively communicate with law enforcement officials if needed. There may be, a minor injury which they can assist with only to the extent they feel comfortable, and otherwise direct to the first aid stations. That's their job. And the analog that we're using in this regard is what transpired last year with the Boston Tea Party celebration and reenactment in downtown Boston, and that was in a very confined geographic space. One of the things we learned in talking with the individuals who were responsible for putting on that event, which was very well attended at nighttime, et cetera, was to have a strong, dedicated, and well-informed and trained volunteer corps.
Great.
So
That's-
that was
okay.
great advice, and that's what we're attempting to do. And I
Great.
shout out to Court and others for helping pull
Yeah.
this initiative together.
Great.
Very helpful.
The last time you were here, I remember what Fred Ryan said was that he was mostly worried about a counter protest, and I heard you say that you can scale up or you can scale down. So I'm sure you've thought this through, and there might be things at the last minute that you're,
Well, we've planned for those, Mary.
Yep.
Those will be deployed from the UCC as needed, so the eyes and ears on the ground right at the parade would say we get a protest that disrupts the parade. We're gonna deploy resources
Okay.
to that location immediately, and we have the teams in place for that. They're not gonna be out there, they're gonna be staged strategically.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
great.
how's it all come together from a budget? I know I'm probably asking something broader a little bit than safety, but just, from the budget and how it's all kind of tracking as you're rolling in.
We are still on track and within budget. Day by day, week by week, not surprisingly, there are some unforeseen or unaccounted for needs that arise, but we've I know we've been very careful in our use and expenditure of these public funds, and mindful particularly that there were going to be unknowns and uncertainties that
Sure.
would pop up. So we've been able to deal
But
with
you haven't
this.
had big
Not that I know of.
minor unknowns, right?
To our chief financial officer, if you're aware of anything that's looming in that regard.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
Not that we know of. We are planning on taking out an additional insurance policy for the event, which is approximately $25,000. So we're hoping to cover that through the 250th funds. We have another plan too in case we can't, but we look to our insurance trust fund, I think, to cover that if we have to. But I think that they'll have enough money at the end of the day to cover that.
The
Great.
public safety budget is right on target.
Excellent.
Great.
Plus, a lot of the effort that you've been doing has been covered with your normal operating budget, right?
And we've a lot of mutual aid partners coming in that aren't gonna cost us anything.
Okay,
great.
very good,
That's great.
very good.
Great.
Can I just add
Yes,
just to echo what the chief has said, but how important, how critical the staff have been in this effort. Working with a large cadre of volunteers is challenging. And I just want to extend my great thanks to the town staff, because they really have stepped up, and, they have I say their day job, and then they've just stepped
Exactly.
up with
It's a lot.
energy and enthusiasm, and yes, even times of exasperation, but, they're
I
hanging
didn't
in
say
there.
that. I said, and their night job.
But, yeah, kudos.
Yeah.
Kudos.
thank you.
A lot
Thank
of
you.
work.
It's good to hear that. Thank you very much. We're looking
Great.
forward to a fun, safe day.
Yep. People are getting very excited.
Yeah.
It's getting very exciting.
It's just all this
Yeah,
past
it's great.
weekend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot.
Yes.
Is there anything that gives us a better estimate of how many people might show up? I know it's, I know, I just didn't know if there's anything that, indicates anywhere that.
We haven't had any change in our estimates.
What is your estimate right now?
Well, in 75 to 150 to 175,000, we're planning on that upwards of
Got it.
200,000.
Got it. Yep.
Could be weather
Is there,
dependent.
is there, a-
Weather, I know.
Right, yeah.
yeah.
And the media attention is, I can tell
Big.
you, it's definitely rising. If you saw this
Awesome.
past weekend, the lighting of the lantern.
Yeah.
There
It was
were
in the Globe.
television
Yeah,
stations
that was-
there. I'm going to be interviewed by the Boston Globe this week. I mean, on
great.
it goes. So it's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah,
It's
it
here.
is, getting exciting. Lots of
Thank you.
events.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Thank
A
you
lot of
all.
hard work, a lot of coordination.
Okay.
Okay. Next on our agenda is the FY '26 proposed town budget.
Okay, thank you and good evening. We do have a presentation to share. I know you have 20 minutes allotted.
Sure,
I'm
take your
going
time.
to.
Take your time.
All right, well, I'm on track to
we've got
whip
time.
through this.
Okay.
Okay.
You've
All
got the
right.
speech down to 20 minutes.
I know.
Okay, sorry. Do it in 20 minutes.
All right, next slide. So again, this is our final recommendation to the Select Board on the fiscal '26 budget. We've talked to you multiple times about the budget at different points in time, but we do still have a budget recommendation that meets the Finance Committee guideline. So on this first slide, on the right-hand side, in Concord, we always talk about the budget in terms of guidelines and non-guidelines. So I just wanted to show you what the budget looks like there. So the town is approximately 23% of the total spending, CPS 33, CCRSD 17, and then non-guidelines 27%. On the left-hand slide, I just laid this out in terms of education spending versus all other spending. In a lot of the communities that I've worked in, and probably the communities that Anthony has worked in, a lot of times they're looking at the budget in that light as well. So if you look at it that way, our education spending, if you add in capital and debt service, is about 59%. Other municipal services, excluding employee benefits and other insurances, is about 28%. And then employee benefits and some other minor things are about 13%. I have not broken out the employee benefits yet. That's something that we can do, but I haven't done that at that point in time. And keep in mind that under this employee benefits, we have town, CPS, and we have retirees as well.
It would be helpful to see that broken out by the other big categories, education and other.
Yeah, and we can do that in time for the public hearing. And then at the top, I just put in another graphic on households. And this data comes from the census that the town clerk issues each year. And I did this sort of as a reality check because I feel like I often say 2/3 of the households in town have school-aged children, and I mean 2/3 do not and 1/3 does. In fact, it's closer to 75% of households in town that do not have school-aged children. So I just wanted to put that out there just for your information.
And so the numbers on the left and the right-hand side of the chart, so like, for instance, education is 59% on the total on the left.
Yes, because
Table. On the right, you would look at CPS plus CCRSD, that totals 50%, but then there's also education spend that's in the non-guideline.
just that 1.8, that's for Minuteman, yes. Does that make sense? So the only education spending that is included in the non-guidelines section is for the Minuteman VOTEC school, and that's about $1.8 million.
Yes, but there's got to be something else in the non-guideline,
Yeah, because it
right?
comes out to 59%, and if I,
Yeah, it's the,
yeah, so,
so CCRSD and CPS on the percentage chart is 50% versus on the
So,
left-hand side is
okay,
59.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm assuming
debt-
there's the debt.
The debt,
It's the debt,
the
right,
debt
yeah.
service
Yeah,
in
it's
that.
debt,
yeah.
there you
Yeah,
go.
Yeah.
Yes.
because in the non-guideline includes
Yeah.
that debt piece plus the
Right.
Minuteman.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
So we're good with that? Okay.
Yep, we're good.
Next slide, please. So we present the town's general fund budget in 7 cost centers, and they are listed here: general government, finance, et cetera. We did ask departments to submit level service budgets for fiscal '26, and the level service resulted in an increase of about $1.5 million over fiscal '25. We did reduce the level service request by approximately $600,000 to meet the Finance Committee guideline of 2.85%, which is an increase in dollars of $933,250. Next slide. So then to look at the reductions, I'll take up expenses first. So we reduced expenses by about $200,000. The bulk of the reductions is coming from facilities maintenance as we continue to take advantage of savings resulting from a consolidated facilities management and custodial services operation. On the personnel side, we reduced that by $400,000, resulting in a decrease of FTEs of 4.74 positions. One of those was by eliminating a vacant position. Others came from voluntary reassignments. And we do have one planned layoff, and that is the Director of Sustainability. Next slide.
So Carrie, just on that, the total, right? So this is a reduction. This is not necessarily a year-over-year reduction in headcount, right?
No, this is 26 versus 25. So in 26, we will be minus 4.74.
Okay. So this is, I wasn't sure if it was a year-over-year reduction or if it was just to get back to the 2.9% increase.
Well, in order to meet the guideline, we are reducing personnel by $400,000, and that results in a reduction of the 4.74 positions.
The future's not looking like we can add these back probably in the next fiscal year, so these would be permanent reductions.
Okay.
So can I just
But the
ask?
budget is
yeah.
going up. The budget's going up by $900,000.
For
So what I
salary.
wasn't sure was, is it actually a reduction year over year in headcount?
It is a headcount reduction, but the cost of the headcount and expenses in '26 is $933,000 more than in '25.
All right.
Carrie, the one question I had was on the, in Public Works, we have a reassigned duties to enterprise. So we took one FTE out, but that one FTE is going to be in the enterprise budget. Is that correct?
Yes.
Under- okay.
And I can speak to that a bit more when we get to
Okay, all
Public
right, that's
Works,
fine. Okay,
if that's
just wanted to
okay. All right. So the next slide. So obviously, the reduction of the position of Director of Sustainability is a difficult one to make. It's something that I thought about for what felt like a very long time. Effective July 1st, 2025, the Office of Sustainability will be led by the Deputy Town Manager with the assistance of our management analyst. But I want to assure the community that Concord's commitment to sustainability will remain unchanged. So on this slide, we're showing work that is currently being undertaken within the various departments and will be ongoing in the area of sustainability. And I wanted to highlight two main projects starting in the current fiscal year, but both continuing in fiscal '26, and that is first to update the Climate Action Plan, and then the second project is completion of the ESCO, or energy audit. This is a joint effort between town and school, led by the town. The anticipated outcome will be the identification of various energy efficiency projects, probably to begin with mostly in the school, which can be funded through energy cost savings. We will be working with an outside vendor. We expect to issue the request for proposals before the end of this fiscal year. And again, most of the work of the audit taking place in fiscal '26.
Great.
Okay, next slide. So in the next series of slides, I'm going to just quickly review the major points in each of the 7 cost centers. There are 2 slides per cost center. The first will be a 3-year comparison of budget, including FTEs, and the second will be fiscal '26 detail and a breakdown between personnel and expense. So in general government, from a budget perspective, we are proposing a reduction of 2.48%, a reduction of 3.95 FTEs. Staffing adjustments will occur in the town manager's office, human resources, IT, and sustainability. As mentioned previously, eliminating the dedicated position of Director of Sustainability and reassigning the workload to the Deputy Town Manager. In Human Resources, we're looking to eliminate the position of Senior Administrative Assistant. The Assistant Town Manager serves as both the Director of Human Resources and the Director of Human Services, and beginning in fiscal '26, we will be allocating her salary between the two departments, 75% to Human Resources, 25% to Human Services. So you can see that included on this table. There is no funding in HR or anywhere in the budget for the Human Resources consultant now that the Human Resources Department is fully staffed. In our IT department, we are choosing not to fund the Business Systems Analyst position and the part-time GIS Analyst position. The director's scope has changed through the reallocation of broadband to CMLP, so the department is, the director is now the Chief Information Officer, and will have more opportunity to just focus on IT and Minuteman Media Network without having the additional workload of broadband. So we're hoping that we're able to make do without the Business Systems Analyst position.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So we're down 3.95 head count, right?
Yes.
And out of that, one of those is actually a layoff.
One is a layoff.
And the others are positions that were budgeted, that were unfilled, and that are going to be taken out of the budget and not replaced.
That's correct.
Did I understand that?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So next slide.
So just before we jump
sure.
off there, the budget's not, I mean, the budget's going down by $100,000, right? But we're going down by 4 head count, which is not a lot of money per person, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, because the cost per employee is then going up from 146,000 to 167,000, which is up like 15%.
yeah, so keep in mind that this reduction is not, it's not just personnel, it's the net reduction, personnel and expense. So there have also been some other expense reductions. So we're,
And
Yeah, but that would go in the opposite direction. So I guess I would have thought if we were reducing 4 FTEs, I'm just for understanding, I would have thought like we would save more than $100,000, I guess.
The way, can I?
Sure.
The way I understand it is, yes, we're reducing those FTEs, but the people we're giving increases to. So,
Yeah,
right?
yes.
So that's some of it.
Some of it, yes. The math would tell you that it's, the cost per employee is going up by 15%.
And that's not what's happening.
Yeah, so that's why,
Yeah.
so either there's other expenses
There are.
that are going up, not going, like
Yeah, I
something
mean-
else is in there that's,
So you can
going
see,
up.
for instance, town meeting, the expense associated with town meeting is increasing $22,000. There are other expense, in addition to any agreed-upon adjustments in salary, there are other expenses that are going up. We have additional software costs. We carry almost all of our software costs across the general fund are carried within information systems. So there are offsetting costs.
okay.
Okay.
Are there, I wasn't sure if, Wendy, did you have a question, or was that on
I was
another
just looking-
slide?
no.
Okay. So then on the next slide, we're showing the breakdown between personnel and expense. And this will be the same, the layout is the same for each of the cost centers, so I'll take a minute to explain the differences between the different personnel categories. So we have full-time regular, which I think is self-explanatory, part-time regular, which is probably self-explanatory. These are part-time people who are benefit eligible. We have our limited status employees. These are employees who have a regular schedule, but they do not work enough hours to be benefit eligible.
Okay.
And then temporary would just be people who work occasionally, and then the expense. So in the general government cost center, the breakdown between personnel and expense is about 60-40. There is also a historical staffing chart that shows 10 years fiscal 16 through 25, so it does not take into account any adjustments in 26. And at the end of the presentation, I'll talk to you a little bit about the 10-year history across the organization. So the next slide, the next cost center is finance. So in fiscal 26, finance is increasing 4.26% over fiscal 25. The largest increase is in accounting, and this is to continue to optimize use of our Munis ERP with the intent of reducing manual work to improve timeliness of financial reporting. There's no FTE adjustment being proposed.
Are you shifting an FTE, though, from administration down to town accountant?
Yes.
Okay, that's all it is.
So then the next slide, I think the only thing, again, this is the same setup. Just wanted to point out the split here between personnel and expense is about 81% personnel, 19% expense. Next slide is our Department of Planning and Land Management. This cost center is generally level funded, resulting in some decreases in temporary staffing and natural resources. So we did cut back on our ranger program, our seasonal ranger program. We didn't eliminate it, but we did cut back some of our budget there. And then the additional savings is coming from Board of Health, where we've had some new hires and their rates were lower than the people going out. So no adjustment in headcount, and again, approximately level funded 26 versus 25.
Yep.
On the next slide, just wanted to point out that the split between personnel and expense is about 90% personnel and about 10% expense. And then our next cost center, human services. We're proposing an increase of 10.31%, or about $360,000. In library, we are no longer proposing any change in hours, so no closures. The budget that is presented meets the state-required minimum spending in all categories. In senior services or council on aging, we are reducing and transferring 1 FTE. Here's I think an important change to point out. We are no longer relying on the community trust grant funding for any salary positions. And so this is something, for a very long time, the town has been receiving funding from the community chest for specific positions within the Council on Aging. And for a number of years, the community chest has asked the town to reduce its reliance on the grant for salaries. So we have captured all of the salaries for COA positions, either in the general fund budget or in the formula grant that we receive from the state. And then we are reprogramming the community chest grant funding for some new programs, again, versus salaries. In human services, we are creating a generalist position, and that is through the reallocation of a position that was no longer needed at the COA based on the current organizational structure. I also will note again that the Director of Human Services is the Assistant Town Manager, and for the first time in 26, 25% of that salary is allocated to human services. The human services generalist position will support the entire department and also provide support to our boards and committees under human services, most notably the Commission on Disability.
Carrie, what's in the increase in the library, the $164,000?
So this is the minimum spending that is required by the state and the new library union contracts, the 2 union contracts, plus any additional increases in expenses.
Can you explain the state requirement? I don't think I've heard that before. I'm not familiar with it. So.
I wonder if, so I don't misspeak. I ask our library director, Emily Smith, to respond.
Hi, I'm Emily Smith. I'm the library director. So the town is required to pay a 2.5% increase annually over the last 3 fiscal years averaged of the municipal appropriations. This is a state requirement in order for us to get our state aid.
Oh, okay.
And also to be a part of the...
And yes, to be able to reciprocal lend to other libraries, to be able for our patrons to go borrow from other libraries, for us to lend to others. There's other requirements as well for our materials expenditure. Depending on how many hours we are open a week, we have to spend either 15% of our budget, of our total municipal appropriation on books and materials. That doesn't have to come from the municipality. It doesn't. It's a shared funding from our friends, our corporation, and the town's appropriation. But because we are open 63 hours a week and will continue to be next year with our Sundays, we actually only have to spend 12% of our budget on that. They reward you if you're open more hours a week than they designate in a chart for your population size. So we are open the highest amount for the highest population size. So we only have to be 12% instead of 15%.
Great. Well, thank you for that explanation.
I can keep going.
I'm sure you could. No, that's great. Thank you. So Carrie, the FTE increase of 1.25, so it's 1 is the generalist, and then at 25 is that the allocation from the assistant town manager?
That's correct.
Okay, great.
Next slide, please. So in human services, our split between personnel and expense is about 85% personnel, 15% expense.
Yeah, just noting that that's very heavily skewed towards what we just heard about with the library consuming more
Yeah.
than half of the expense for the whole.
Yep. Yep, majority.
Okay, next slide, please. The next cost center is public safety. The increase is 4.49% or $543,000. There are no notable staff changes, but we have created a standalone dispatch function, and we're showing that in the budget for the first time in fiscal '26. I will note that we're currently exploring the opportunity to provide contractor-hosted dispatch services to neighboring communities. So unlike a regional dispatch district, we feel that we may be in a position to provide some contract services. This is something that, this is not a fiscal '26 implementation, but something that we'd like to be ready for because we understand that all of the indications coming from the state are for these regional or multi-community dispatch centers, and so we're looking at that. So the reduction in police is due to the removal of the dispatch expense and FTE and not a cut in the police department budget. It is offset somewhat by the cost of the settlement of the police union contract, which is currently in effect.
Gary, why, if we're moving 9 out of the police department and we're saving 365, why is there 821 shown as the incremental?
Yeah, and so that
What
is
is that?
that's offset by the cost of the settlement of the police contract.
So that's the increase in wages for the
Yes.
people that are there,
Yes.
the 40 people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So both our police and fire union contracts are a little bit different than non-union and other union contracts, where they have very few steps, and they have much larger increases between steps, and then that means that they could be at top step for a very long time. We have a lot of people in the police department moving through steps, so our wage increases in the next few years are much higher than what you would typically see. So we're showing minimal increase in the fire department as the fire union contract expires at the end of this fiscal year and is yet unsettled. So the funding that we're holding for the settlement of this contract and any other unsettled contracts is held in the salary reserve right now and not within the department.
How much is that?
So that is, let's see, $737,133.
Okay.
And that is, again, that amount is for multiple union settlements, plus non-union merit adjustments. I do want to note that there is a reduction in the fire department in OT. It's not in overtime. It's not as significant as it was when we talked to you in February. This may result in some adjustments to shift strength on occasion, but again, not on as regular a basis as we would have expected based on the February presentation of the budget.
Okay.
And the station expenses are going over to the facilities department?
The station, yes.
Okay.
Next slide, please. Okay, so here, the allocation between personnel and expense is about 79% personnel, about 21% expense. Next slide, please. So the next cost center is Public Works. Our fiscal 26 to 25 comparison shows a decrease of 1.8%, or about $131,000. This really has to do with the change, the adjustment in facilities. So if you took that out, Public Works is about level funded fiscal '26 versus '25. So I did want to mention, again, that we have undertaken a concerted effort to consolidate facilities, expenses, and staff. We will be folding the Parks and Playgrounds division into Public Works, into facilities. This is a division that was first created in, I think it was in fiscal '18. It is other than our parks and our Park and Tree division. So we're doing that. So we are moving the 2 FTE from Parks and Playground, 1 to Park and Tree, 1 to facilities. And I did want to note the 1 position that is moving to the enterprise fund. So this is something, we start our budgeting process very early. In fiscal '25, we would have started in September or October, so the fall prior. At that time, Public Works was still working through some organizational adjustments, and one result was that there was a workload for solid waste that was assigned to an employee who was within the general fund. So we are making that correction in fiscal '26 and moving salary for that person over to solid waste. And that we have traditionally had 1 FTE in solid waste for a long period of time.
Good.
I guess I'll also note, and maybe I said this, we are bringing the facilities activity fully into CPW for the first time in fiscal '26. Previously, it had been showing in general government, but from a functional perspective, it's been part of CPW since fiscal '24. Next slide, please. So unlike the split for all of the other cost centers in Public Works, about 54% is allocated to personnel and about 46% to expense.
So does that facilities administration expense include essentially the energy bill for the community, for the facilities?
It does in almost all occasions. So you might have noticed in Human Services, some of the expense associated with Harvey Wheeler is still in Human Services.
Okay.
But other than that, library, all of those utility costs are in facilities.
So remind me, all of recreation is now in the revolving fund. Is that
Recreation is in a revolving fund, BD is in an enterprise fund.
right? And so, and the recreation, there are no recreation expenses now in this.
In the general fund, that's
Thank you.
correct.
But the Hunt Gym facility would be covered by which? The recreation
The
department?
recreation revolving
Yeah, we took
fund.
it out of the general fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are they using the centralized facility administration and getting a chargeback? Or no?
So they have a building maintenance custodian. So anything that that person couldn't handle, if it was something that facilities could handle, we would work on a chargeback. If it was a contracted service, they would pay directly.
And these numbers are all net of the chargebacks to the enterprise funds. Is
That's-
that correct?
No, these numbers are
Before.
grossed up. The chargebacks come in as revenue, and they offset.
Got it.
Other
You're right.
available
Yep.
funds.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Good.
So the next slide, unclassified. And then we have our total showing here. So fiscal '26 is an increase of 19% or $156,000. All of that is to account for the increase in the salary reserve. Again, the salary reserve is the account where we set aside funding to settle union contracts and to provide any other anticipated salary, unanticipated salary adjustments and any non-union merit adjustments. Currently, in the current fiscal year, we have 2 contracts, collective bargaining agreements that have expired, and we are working through negotiating a successor agreement. We also have the fire contract that is expiring at the end of this year, and after the 250th event, we're going to start bargaining with that group. And then we have an allocation for non-union merit adjustments. So in summary, again, the budget that is presented meets the Finance Committee guideline of an increase of 2.85% or $933,000. Includes a reduction of 4.74 FTEs. Overall, personnel expense in the general fund under this budget proposal is 71%, and other expenses 29%. Next slide. So in terms of how this shakes out, so to speak, between our internal and external service departments. So our internal service departments are kind of our back-of-the-house operation. It represents about 15% of this budget proposal versus 16% in the current fiscal year. There are 33.13 FTEs devoted to internal service departments. The total increase to internal service is 0.27%. Our external service departments, the overall increase is 3.33%, so you can see the budget allocation is overweighted to external service departments. We have 219.73 FTEs providing public-facing services. It's about 85% of our budget, as opposed to 84% of the budget in the current fiscal year. And then I did put 2 slides in here showing a 10-year perspective, because there were some questions that we received or have been receiving for some time. So if you have a couple of minutes to go through this, I'd be happy to do that. I know this is busy and obviously will take some time to digest. I think the key takeaways are that there has been significant budget growth across all aspects of municipal government, not just on the town side, but school as well. And that has generally outpaced inflation due to increased service level demands, a strong interest in proactively funding our long-term liabilities at a rate that exceeds state mandates, the need for capital replacement, much of which has been funded through voter-approved debt exclusions. Nearly all of this funding has been within Finance Committee guidelines, and I say nearly all because I wasn't here for the entire 10-year period, and I don't want to misspeak. But all of this was approved by town meeting.
Yep.
So I will point out, just because we just mentioned the enterprise fund transfer. So in fiscal 18 and prior, the practice was to move expense associated with general fund expense associated with enterprise activities, to move the expense from the general fund over to the enterprise funds. Beginning in fiscal 19, we stopped that practice and instead moved the revenue to support that activity into the general fund.
Okay, yep.
Mm-hmm.
No, I remember.
And then if I could, just another minute on the 10-year historical perspective on FTEs. During this time, the FTE increase is 34.52. It's detailed on the chart, and then I've just put in some talking points of where this increase has come from. So during this time, we've created a full-service IT department. We've established a facilities department. We've added 2 school resource officers, expanded ambulance service started and expanded ambulance service in West Concord. We've increased library staff to support the addition of 15,160 square feet of programming space. We've assumed the responsibility for the visitor center, which prior to that was operated by the Chamber of Commerce, and we've added some additional positions. And so that
I
That
guess
generally accounts for
The
the
one
increases.
you didn't mention would be the Minuteman Median
Oh, yeah?
was
That-
also,
But that's an enterprise fund activity.
Okay.
So I did not
but managing
include
it,
it here.
yeah. 'Cause it used to be flat out standalone.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
So Carrie, when I see this budget, the only risk, the FY '26 budget, the only risk that sticks out for me is in Department of Planning and Land Management, because it's a level-funded budget, level headcount budget, and I see a lot of demands on that department coming up next year. If we've got MCI, we're going to need new zoning. We've had a backlog of people or the town wanting to understand parking requirements better. So do you see any risk to that?
I think there is some risk in just about every area of the town budget. We're taking advantage of some new technologies, new procedures, new processes faster than I think feels somewhat comfortable in order to preserve other areas of the budget. So yes, there is a lot of activity that will be coming forward involving Department of Planning and Land Management. Some of the reason that we are able to keep the budget level are changes in salary. So we've had some people leave and other people come in at a lower rate. So that's where some of the savings is. But we're not reducing headcount. We're obviously not adding. We have added headcount in DPLM, particularly in Board of Health and building inspections over the
Right, yeah, I
last
saw
few
that.
years. In planning, we did also add a planner. I'm not sure if that was 24 or 25. It took a long time to recruit, but that is an increase as well.
When we put together our goals for the year, I think that's a place we want to pay particular attention to as far as what are realistic goals for planning and land management in FY '26.
Yep.
Well, and, Megan's role isn't split anymore either. So I think that's important. So we
Right.
have some new resources and expertise. So that helps.
Yeah,
But
it does. It helps,
Yeah.
but we've got to,
I know.
we're asking a lot of them next year, in particular, I think. Any other comments, questions? I want to go to some of the slides that we
Well,
put in for you.
Cameron,
Anthony.
Yeah,
Yes.
just a couple things. So first of all, thank you. There's a lot here that I know the team has got into putting together. I would like to call out that there's a lot more information here than I've seen in previous presentations, which I think is great, right? Like seeing a 10-year history, seeing how the FTEs compare year over year, looking at like sort of a 3-year comparison. So I think there's a lot more here that sort of tells more of the story. And ultimately it's come in to meet the guidelines. So I only have I don't even know that there are just a couple of things where I'd either just maybe like to see a little bit more information. So I kind of was able to digest a little bit more on page 90, and it really comes down to one line, which is the human resources line. So the HR line, we're seeing a reduction in FTEs of 1.25 people, but yet the budget is going up. So I don't know if there's a quick explanation for that, or if there's, as to just sort of what money's being spent there.
So one of the things that we have captured here is recruiting expense. In the past, we have, if there are expenses related to recruiting, we have charged them back to the department. We have centralized that estimated recruiting expense in HR because we want to keep a better track of how much we're spending on recruiting. And so that would be one of the big increases here. I'm not sure if you can think of anything else specifically.
The other thing I think I heard Jessica say last week was that also you wanted to centralize it in HR so that we made sure we stayed within the comp and benefits plan that we had done. So it wasn't up to the department heads as much as it was consistent with the comp and benefits plan that we had put together.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a bit of a shift then if it was in other departments and you're
Yes.
moving it into.
And I would say it was
HR.
likely not adequately funded in other departments either.
Great. So that was, and then 96 was the same, like human services, we have flat head count, but we have costs going up over 10%. So it was just another area where
And
sort of what are we spending the additional money on?
Yeah, and that is the shift from relying on grant funding for some of the positions in the senior center, bringing those into the general fund, and then using the grant funding that we have received for programming that is not included in this budget.
Okay. Got it. Okay. All right, that's helpful. And then I think just ultimately overall, it'd be nice to see in these, just how much overall is expense growth versus personnel cost growth. Like in total, like on page 102, you've got the total, it's like 71% people, 29% expense or something like that, but it's hard to see how much
What
each
the
one is
dollar
growing.
value is.
Yeah, and just, so you just get a sense of like, are we growing more expenses, or are we growing more people cost? But otherwise, covered all my questions and points, so thank you.
There is a chart in the budget book that we're working on that breaks that down with salaries and expenses over the last 3 years.
That's
So you'll
great.
see that.
That'll be great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of information, so thank you.
So that was actually, the question I had was the budget book when it comes out. Obviously, this is sort of presentation, but what, I don't know when we're going to see that, or what'll be in it, or just
So
an
so we're
update on
ready
that.
for public hearings.
Yeah.
And we're working on it now.
Okay.
And hopefully we shot for April 1st, but we're waiting on a couple things.
Yeah.
But we definitely have something up, even if it's not complete with the enterprise fund. We'll still work on that. But
Yeah.
we'll have most of it up and ready to go for April 1st.
Yeah, I guess to that point, Cameron, it's just like, there'll be more text that goes with that budget book, right? So what you're talking through is what will be present in those books. And it sounds like you're saying that there'll be trend in the FTE and salary versus non-salary expense for each department, and there'll be a 3-year trend in that? That's what you said?
This chart's breaking it down by salaries for every single person, every department. There's org charts that breaks down
Okay,
every position, so, yeah.
okay. Well, we'll wait and see, but it sounds like more detail. That's good. This is a really nice presentation,
No,
by the way. It was
I think
nice
this
to-
is a good,
Yeah.
for those of us that remember the old budget book process,
Yeah.
that you could put together the trends pretty easily because you had 2 or 3 years in each budget book and you could link them going forward. So it'll be nice to see that restored and hopefully even bridging that gap. I think one of the challenges that we've had is since we haven't been able to consistently produce the budget book in a couple of years here.
1 year.
One
One year.
Well,
Feels like
to me, it feels like it's been, it impacts the cycle before and after. Anyway, it's that has sort of broken that chain and we need to put it back together. And then I think it'll be a lot easier to follow. I'd also note that in terms of expenses, and, since I had a hand in some of what happened in the IT department, I know this, the step one to get efficiency is consolidate the like expenses in one place. And that's what happened as we brought it together. And, if you go back up to the general government one, you notice that one of the major boxes is the IT expense. So you centralize that, which pulls it in, and then you can begin to manage it better.
But that's also exact, to your point, why I think it's important to show the head
see
count
that.
and the expense
Yes.
change, because I can reduce IT
Yeah.
head count all day long. I may not reduce the expense, I'll just outsource it,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it doesn't necessarily save you money,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
that is, that's probably the piece that the budget book would carry. It has
Yeah.
that expense line trended as well, right next to the FTE line, so you can see those shifts when they occur. Yeah.
Okay. Anthony, there are also some slides here that I think that you provided. I would like to take a minute and look at the revenue, the FY26 revenue projections, and talk about them briefly? I think that's on page 115 of the packet.
Yeah, so you asked for the revenues, and, you know, as you know, there's the three sources, there's property tax, state aid, and then local receipts and other available
Yep.
sources, and those would be the transfers.
Yep.
So, I know that some members of FinCom, that one of the things that we had discussions about was around the state aid and what's
Yep.
going on in the federal government and so forth. So, especially with the elimination of Department of Education, how does that affect even to Concord? So,
Let's wait until it's up there.
yeah, one more.
Yeah, one more. I think
Yes.
one more. There you
Looks
go,
like it's
good.
down
Yeah.
4.
Okay, so the property taxes is basically a plug, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
let's-
2.5% plus new growth, right?
Okay, so let's go down and see what state aid, and talk about those.
Yeah, so state aid is, these numbers that we have for the recommended budget is the governor's House One budget that was put out. So
Okay.
that still has to go through the budget process. It'll vary a little bit, but for the
Okay.
most part, I'm comfortable with that. Just, you know, one of the things that we had some conversations with a few of FinCom members about, what about the state aid and what about
Yep.
Chapter 70, right? So lo and behold, Chapter 70 is state money, it's not federal money. So that's not something that, as a result of what's going on in Washington, that's going to affect us.
Yep.
And the next slide that we have is, you know, some of our vulnerabilities. If we're worried about, if you ask me what I'm worried about next year, it's on the town side, these two areas in the schools, the ESSA funds and the IDEA funds.
Yep.
Those are funds that come directly from the federal government. So on the left-hand side, you know, I wanted to point out that what we're getting this year for those two categories, and it's $683,000. So, and on the right side is the region, it's $512,000. The
Okay.
good thing that I'm hearing out of Washington is that that's not something that's gonna go away, even with the elimination of the Department of Education. So, it's something to flag, just to know where we get our money from.
Okay.
And to answer those questions, but, you know, if anything, I'd probably be more concerned about a recession and the trends and that, moving forward with, you know, how the tariffs will affect goods and services and so forth, so.
New growth, yeah.
We gonna,
I'm going to go back to the revenue slide.
Yes.
backwards, Andrew?
There you go. Okay, so the state aid, you feel like it might not vary too much from that 6.3.
Right.
What about the local receipts and other sources?
So local receipts, it's very conservatively projected. I would expect this actually because of the 250th, which I did not take into consideration, that we'll have an influx of
Okay.
meals and room occupancy tax.
Okay,
So
that's this fiscal year.
that's this fiscal year.
Right.
Yeah. So
How much do you have in there for pilot program?
pilot was just
It's
what
200.
we flat funded. Oh, no.
No,
it was-
pilot.
Like
Oh,
200
it was
or
only-
something. Wasn't like,
I don't have that in front of me. It was only like $50,000 because for the first year, in
low.
growing up.
That's all?
Yeah, well, we have nothing right now, so we have to negotiate those, and those are gonna take time. So we don't wanna put something in there that we're not certain of, and that's something we're not certain of.
Well, I'd like it to be a motivating number. I mean, 50,000,
It's,
I would expect we'd get more than that.
that's our goal. It's always our goal with any of our revenues that we look to get more, but we don't plan on something that we don't know that we have.
50,000 just seems way too low to me.
I'm guessing with that, Mary. I'm not, I
Okay.
don't have that in front of me.
Okay, so when we do this when we come up with the final number so that we figure out what the property tax would have to be, I'd like to have a little bit more, a better plan and a little bit more aggressive thinking about that. Pilot revenue.
I guess my question on this was, this looks like the local reaches is up $1 million since the last time. You had an estimate in February of 16.1 million, so this has gone up a fair amount
It was.
from a budget perspective.
What we didn't have in there is the ambulance, because the ambulance receipts switched to a revolving fund. So it was a transfer from the revolving fund.
Okay, so that's the difference.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so, anything else about the local receipts that we should know?
I'd like to just throw something out there. So we have a couple of departments looking at fees.
Yep.
Most notably in DPLM, we have the Board of Health that has put together a proposal for a fee increase. And I just received today a proposal for a building permit increase. So we are looking at local fees.
That's good.
And that has not yet been taken into account in the.
That's good, because I don't even think they cover
estimate.
their costs right now, right?
Well, we can't do more, we legally can't do more than cover our costs.
Oh, we can't make money on it. Okay.
Like, if we get grants, is that in other sources? Is that a revenue source?
grants
Or
would
is
be
it a-
separate.
It's grant, okay,
It becomes a special revenue fund that gets.
got it, okay, so it's not in this.
And I think earlier tonight, we said that the chargebacks to the enterprise funds was in here as well?
Yes.
Okay, and have we looked at that to see if that's covering our costs?
So that's one of the projects that we have planned for FY '26 too, is to take a good look at our indirect cost and make sure that we are truly recovering all the costs that we, for the services that we provide to the enterprise and revolving funds.
So we are showing an increase for & but it's
2.5%,
generally based on the methodology that we have been using, and we'd like
Got
to,
it. Okay.
to look at.
The
to
methodology.
revisit the
That would be
methodology over
great.
the summer.
Okay, good, good. Yeah, I think we've got some opportunity here in this line, is what I'm saying. And I'm particularly interested in the pilot program. Okay,
The-
great, thank
the-
you.
The nice thing is, revenues are not appropriated by town meeting, so they can change. Revenues are set through the tax classification process that's in November.
That's right.
And so if over and enterprise fund receipts, enterprises for the most part are not working on a firm town meeting
Schedule,
budget.
yes.
And so we are, if we make significant progress over the summer, we can take that into account through the tax rate setting
Very good.
process.
Very good, okay. Okay, any other questions for Carrie or Anthony?
Sorry, are we, on the other pages, like pages 108 through,
The
are we
joint
going back to
accounts.
any of these other ones, or?
Did they change much from the last projection? I don't think they
No, they
did.
haven't.
No,
Your
not
assumptions
much.
haven't
The,
changed.
On the joint accounts, again, I just explained what some of the increases are, and on the debt, it did make the adjustments for projected debt from last year, so we added that in, and then the number here is showing net of the $1 million that would be transferring from the
You're
middle
applying
school
it, yep.
stabilization to cover the excluded debt, the excluded debt.
Yeah, we've gone through these before, except for those
Okay.
few
Yeah, we
changes,
didn't have
yeah.
the debt. Yep.
So, I'm sorry, then I just need to ask a question or two. So on, like, page 112, the debt, the town debt's going up by, what's just driving the 1.2 million increase?
It's additional debt that was included for FY '25 capital projects, is for town and school.
So we had a later than typical issuance where we didn't have a debt service payment due in fiscal '25. So we have a new debt service payment first, our first debt service payment associated with the 2024 bond issue coming in '26, and then there's an estimate for a debt service payment for the 2025 bond issue, which will happen later before the end of the fiscal year. So it's two payments
Okay.
coming on.
But it's not new, it's not a new project
No,
being-
we did a
going into the
short-term, we did a
projection.
short-term ban, if you remember,
Yeah.
so that's,
That's
now
right.
we bonded.
You did in
with-
September.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, got it. No, and then on 109, I mean, a big driver is the group insurance, right?
Big
Yes.
drive.
Which is
That's a
going up 1.4
14.84% increase.
Oh.
Yeah.
$1 million, right? So we know that's
Yeah.
driving a lot.
Yep.
Have we got the actual
is cr-
increase? We did get the 14 point,
Oh, it is 14.4?
That's an accurate number, yes.
So we are, Jess Porter is working with our Insurance Advisory Committee, and we're looking at different plan design options and may propose some for a 1/1/26, right? 1/1/26 versus 7/1/25. So we may make some adjustments, but we don't have enough time to make adjustments and get that through the
You mean we may
the
get 6
internal.
months
you might change
before
your
the
plan
increase
mid-year?
Yeah.
comes?
No, we're going to have a 14.8% increase, but that may be softened somewhat by some mid-year plan design changes, if we can get those
Remember,
through.
that 14.84% increase is an increase for the town. It's also an increase for the employee, too. So that's why Jess is going through
Great.
with our Insurance Advisory Committee to see if there's, if they're interested in reducing some of their expense, too, which would also reduce some of our expenses.
So if we fortunate enough to do that, what we budgeted will be, the excess from what we budgeted will go to free cash.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other questions about any of this for now?
No, it's a lot of
Okay,
information.
we're going to have another run through this at the FinCom hearing, right?
Yeah.
On February, let me see, April 15th, I think, is when we're up again. So people out there can ask questions at the hearing, Tuesday, April 15th, on this budget, on the town's proposed budget. Okay, thank you.
That's great.
We're talking now about the town's reserve policy.
Thanks to the department heads for hanging in
Thank you.
Yes.
and being available.
Do we have slides for this?
Yes,
Yeah,
it's in the new packet, yeah.
119.
There it
There
is,
they are,
right
there
there,
they
yeah.
are, there they are. Okay. Good evening.
Members of the Finance
Here
Committee,
we are. Do
how are you?
you want to introduce yourselves to us?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Dahlberg, Chair of the Finance Committee.
Hi, Lindsay Liss, Chair of the Guidelines Committee.
And I'm Don Kupka, I'm the clerk.
And we're joined by our Vice Chair, Lois Wassoff, who's in the audience. Thanks for having us in. Good to be with you in the Finance Committee hearing room, or meeting room.
Let's go there.
We prepared some slides. I sent the slides to Andrea. We subsequently made some changes to the slides, not substantially, but if it's okay, I'll share from my laptop, so you have the latest and greatest in
Sure,
front of
that's
you.
fine.
You
Go
enjoy
ahead.
that? Sure.
Means I got to put my glasses on, though.
Join the
I
Zoom
got to take
call.
mine off.
Seeing close. Far away, I can't see anything far away. So.
All right, there we go.
Okay. I'm going to quickly walk through background and rationale. Then I'm going to pass it off to the brains of the operation. Lindsay's going to walk through some additional information on our current reserves policy, some analysis we did, and then Don is going to talk through his findings, having done some benchmarking work with other towns. And we'll wrap up with an initial recommendation for discussion. Two statements up front. One, we acknowledge you're the chief policy-making body in town, so consider this the Finance Committee's input respecting your authority there. The second is we haven't discussed this or voted on this as a committee yet. Our next meeting is Thursday. We'll discuss it then. So we ask you to consider this an initial
Great.
preliminary
So we're not voting
suggested
tonight, yeah.
recommendation.
Gotcha.
By way of background, we had a preliminary discussion, the Finance Committee had a preliminary discussion on this at our February 27th meeting when we took a look at warrant articles, specifically articles related to reserves, two in particular that the CFO placed on the warrant. Article 18 related to the creation of capital and debt stabilization funds, new stabilization funds, and transfers from initial transfers from free cash for those. And then Article 19 is a free cash transfer into the existing general stabilization fund. So that prompted some discussion within the Finance Committee, and my assumption is that the chair, Mary, invited us in follow-up to that discussion, to continue that discussion.
Yep.
We do think now's the time to have this discussion on reviewing and refreshing town policy on reserves, and that's for a few reasons. One, current policy is dated, it's from 2017. It's quite vague and brief, and we're going to show you the text in a subsequent slide. And it's insufficient under the circumstances, given this focus on new stabilization funds. Two, we're all aware of mounting economic uncertainty out there. We talk about these things in terms of preparing for a rainy day. The possibility of a rainy day seems to be increasing. It's raining outside right now. Three, Moody's, in our most recent rating outlook, they pointed specifically to reserves. They describe it as below average reserves. They affirmed our AAA bond rating. They've done so since 1987, but they flagged our below average reserves. And they went so far as to point to a future decline in available reserves and liquidity as a risk factor for our bond rating. That's one of the factors that could lead to a future downgrade. And then lastly, the Collins Center. Recall that the town commissioned the Collins Center for Public Management to conduct a study of our financial policies and procedures last year. Their final report was very well done. They had a number of findings and recommendations for us to consider. Two of them are relevant to this discussion. They pointed to they say we do not prioritize maintaining adequate cash reserves. And they had a finding, a broad finding that our financial policies are vague, which is what we found ourselves in reviewing them. So we think now's the time to do this. We think this is a timely exercise.
Very good.
Lindsay.
Sure. All right, so we thought it might be helpful to do a little bit of level setting before we jumped into the rest of the presentation. So here we just have the definitions of the types of reserves. So there's free cash, which we're all familiar with, and then there's stabilization funds. Both are considered reserves for a municipality in Massachusetts, but there's some differences between those two things. So free cash is certified annually by the state, and it's the community's remaining unrestricted available funds from operations from the previous fiscal year. These, it's leftover money, leftover cash from the previous year. This, and while as stabilization funds are kind of set up on purpose by town majority voted or a 2/3 vote at town meeting. And they can be special purpose, like the middle school stabilization fund, or general stabilization funds. So the key, I'll just spend the rest of the time just on the similarities and differences. Both free cash and stabilization funds can be used to reduce property taxes. Both can be used to fund capital projects, and both are not to be used for recurring operating expenses or to balance the budget. That's just not the intention. That's not best practice. And in the case of stabilization funds, they're more restricted in certain cases. So the big differences are that stabilization funds carry forward their balances from one fiscal year to the next, and interest can accrue, and any of that interest is reinvested into the fund. Whereas free cash is every year it has to be annually recertified by the state, and it kind of starts over in that way. Free cash is unrestricted for any use that is lawful and non-recurring operating, whereas stabilization funds, again, that are special purpose, like the middle school fund, are restricted to their defined use. So I think one of the benefits of the special purpose or the specialized stabilization funds is that the taxpayer knows where that money is going. So it's set aside for the long term for something that we all agree we want to save it for. So stabilization fund appropriations require a 2/3 majority vote at town meeting, whereas free cash is appropriated by a majority vote annually.
Sorry, does it require a 2/3 vote to create the fund? Or just to spend the money once you have it?
To create it and to add money to it.
So for both, the creation and the spending of the fund?
Yeah, so there have been several, warrants that have come to town meeting to. It's a
Majority to go in. It is.
Oh, it's 2/3 to set it up and majority to add to it?
No,
It's a
wait.
majority. No, it was changed recently, but I think it now is a majority to set it up and put money in and 2/3 to take out.
Take it out.
2/3 to take out.
Okay, good.
'Cause, yeah. Nothing's easy in
I know.
municipal.
Why don't you memorize it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then can I just ask a question? So you made a point to clarify special purpose versus general stabilization. And I guess I was surprised. I didn't realize we had a general stabilization fund. I don't know where I missed that along the way.
Well, you can
Usually,
have one.
they're target, so we have one now, don't we?
I don't, do
We do have one,
we
and
have
so,
money in it?
$5,000.
Yes.
oh, 5,000? Maybe that's why I wasn't paying any attention to it.
Article 19 on the
Is-
town meeting warrant would transfer funds from free cash into the existing.
Yeah, I know,
general
that's why I was aware of
Exists,
it.
But, okay.
Right.
I guess my point is, what is a general stabilization fund used for? I mean, historically, it's like, we got a capital project, it's for that. And even debt, for my bet, goes to that too. So I don't understand how we use that general stabilization. Maybe you guys have had the same question.
Great question, Wendy. I had the same question, and in looking at some of our neighboring towns, other AAA-rated towns, to see how they define that.
Yep.
Our neighbor Lexington has a general stabilization fund with the goal of being able to replace 30% of the income that is out of our control. So that would be 30% of state aid and of the local receipts. And they said, we'd like to be able to replace that for 3 years, add 30% of that for 3 years to come up. That's their target for their general stabilization fund, which makes sense in a recession environment.
Yep, so it has a focus, but it's not restricted necessarily, like
Correct.
a building
Correct.
fund would be. Okay, so I get it. Okay, so there's a purpose behind it.
Balance is 3 months' worth of local receipts and state aid. Is that what you're saying?
For 3 years.
Lexington.
For 3
3
years.
years.
3 years of
Oh, my
that.
So
gosh.
90%.
To ride out a recession.
Well, they were,
That's a lot of money.
yeah.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah, we are, with your examples, for sure.
Okay, that's, wow.
Great, good. I don't mean to hold you up.
3
You
years
can
of-
keep going.
That's
It's a
lot
long
of money.
recession.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
So Eric alluded to this, but the current policy is a bit outdated and it's pretty vague. So we've actually just cut and pasted the current policy and highlighted it here on this slide. So this is the reserve policy. It's section 7 of the financial policies. It says it's town policy to maintain free cash as certified by the Mass DOR at a level between 5 and 10% of the ensuing general fund budget, and with some stipulations. And then the stabilization funds can be created to set aside funds for use of a specific purpose at a later date, so. take there.
Oh, that's new.
So Concord, so here's a bit of a look at where we are with our free cash balance, and our free cash balance is a share of the following year's budget. So on the left-hand side, and then the right-hand side is the middle school stabilization fund balance. So on the left, you can see for several years, from 15 to 20 before the pandemic, we were even above the 10% on, as for free cash as a percent of the following year's budget. And we're over 10 million in balance overall as well. Obviously, there was a bit of a reset with the COVID-19 pandemic, and had to dip into free cash a bit there. And but we haven't been able to bring back up the free cash as a percent of the following year's budget above the 6 or 7% range. So whereas before we were up at 10 to 13%, now we're kind of in the 6 to 7% range, which is in the bounds of our current policy. But we'll get to where we think we might want to head. On the right-hand side is the middle school stabilization fund balance. So at the beginning of, or as of July 2024, the balance was about 4.9 million. Nothing was transferred in. Interest and dividends earned were about $250,000, and nothing was expended, and the ending balance was 5.1 million. Nothing was appropriated for use this year. And I should just say that, in the materials that Anthony has shared, it's the next 4 years are when, the majority of this 5 million is expected to be used to reduce the tax levy in the middle school stabilization fund. However, there's more in there than the plans from November kind of indicate we're planning to spend. So there may be an opportunity to accelerate or increase spending above the current plan levels over the next year or two. So we have a little more than 5 million in the middle school stabilization fund. That's our primary stabilization fund for the town.
So Lindsay, the free cash balance in 2024, you've got that.
What is it? Can you read it? Just sorry.
8 million. I know
Is that
they're kind of
certified?
overlapping. That was certified.
That's last year.
That's last year.
Oh, we don't have
That's
FY.
like a year outdated because it's
Oh,
not
okay.
certified yet.
When will,
Do we even have a guess? I mean, we must be
we
having
have a guess. What's the guess?
The conservative estimate is $10.4 million, with the possibility of going up to about 11.1.
And what percentage would that be?
At 10.4, we would be at 7.75%, and at the 11.1, we'd be at 8.2.
Okay.
not a
Thanks.
big.
So Lindsay, do you remember when the middle school stabilization fund was actually funded originally?
It's right there.
Fiscal year 20.
20.
21?
20, I think it
So-
was 20 it was initially
There were
funded.
multiple years. The initial, I believe, was $2 million. There was a subsequent 1.5 million at town meeting, and that's all I was able to trace back.
Okay, but those were free, is that largely the drop that we see between 20 and 21 in the free cash balance? Was that,
Part of
yeah,
that.
It's a piece
It's part
of
of it.
It's a piece
Yeah.
of it.
okay,
It's half of it, maybe.
yeah.
We were still taking out $1 million every year for property tax relief,
Mhm.
remember?
Yeah,
We
we've,
just stopped that
Yeah.
last year.
That's right.
Right.
yeah,
Remember
we've
that?
been doing that. My point is that we didn't have a significant stabilization fund of any kind really going until we did that. So in terms of
Well,
what the reserve number is, you need to add the 5 million back since 2020 to sort of have an understanding of what
Oh,
our
to get a better
actual
sense of,
reserves
yeah.
are.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a good
yeah,
point.
no, that's a great
true.
point. Yeah.
We'll see a look at total reserves on
Yep.
the following slide, but
Okay, okay.
How fast would we expect to spend a middle school stabilization fund?
maybe what we've seen from Anthony's plans, and you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but over the next 4 years, it's planned to spend that down pretty significantly, down to 1.5 million.
Okay.
So so with the biggest chunk next year, because that's kind of the peak borrowing, and then it kind of tapers off. So maybe spending a little over $1 million next year, and then kind of tapering off over the following 3 years. But even then, we'll probably still have some funds left, so, which is why I said maybe there's an opportunity to accelerate some of that spending if we want to over the next few years.
So I feel like this is a good time for my little speech about how we fund major capital projects.
Wow.
If you go back to
Funded
Alcott, Willard,
differently, too.
Thoreau,
Oh,
we
God.
funded those with level principal.
Right. This is my
Bond
pet
issues.
peeve, too.
So that would mean in rough numbers, I think Thoreau's the one I'm most familiar with, we borrowed $20 million over 20 years and paid back $1 million of principal each year. And so what that created in the tax levy was a very significant bump in the first couple of years because you're paying $1 million plus interest on 19 million, and that goes down. So when you put 5 million into a stabilization fund, which we did for those schools, you could really shave that peak, and you could count on the fact that the funding, that the cost of that borrowing was going to reduce throughout the life of the loan. We did not do that with the middle school.
Right.
The middle school is a level payment program, so it's 30 years, 4 year, not 30 years. I always
It's a
say that.
mix.
It's like a
It's a
mortgage.
mix.
It's like a mortgage.
It's a
Yeah,
blended,
it's like a
but it's like a mortgage, and it's going to be the same number. So the
Stabilization.
impact of a stabilization fund is different
Yes.
on that block
Yep.
for, you know, however many years than it is on that, you know, mountain-shaped,
Right.
almost
Yes, and
roller
the
coaster
other
ride.
The other thing you
Yeah.
could do is extend it further out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because,
That's
right.
because we're going to have a significant payment every year
For
for many
30.
years.
Right,
Yes.
yeah,
So that's one option.
that's
But-
one
but-
option.
But when does the
Yeah.
debt on the existing schools, the other schools? when
Well,
does
that's like that.
See, that, I thought we were trying to shave that with this.
They're,
Well,
they're down.
It's a middle school stabilization fund, but it will shave the
But
other
we're,
schools.
we're starting to see, I mean,
other ones
I
are
think
down.
Are
Alcott,
they?
we
Yeah, they're
finished
way
paying
down, so
for.
that's the idea
We'll
of
be
that
done with
pylon
Thoreau in a
debt
year or
graphic.
two.
Did you
Yeah,
guys
those
have?
are all
Willard, a
gonna-
couple years after that, and then,
But we still have some as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Little.
okay, I'm sorry, we're getting off track.
Yep.
So, thank you for
Not
Willard's the
really,
last
but-
one, and that'll be done in 29.
It's all part of the same question.
But the point, he makes a good point. We're level debt for is it 30-year term?
Yeah,
or-
It's a lot.
Yes, there's
Yeah.
no, there's,
So then you gotta stack all the schools and see when
Yeah.
the stuff
Well,
starts
that's-
rolling off, and
Right.
look at the whole
But-
profile.
And the
That's what we were
roll-off
just
is,
saying.
the roll-off, it takes a lot longer, and it's a lot less significant. So really, all you get is the value of future money, basically your interest rate discount, as opposed to an actual reduction in the cost of this debt year over year.
We're going
Okay.
to illustrate this in the FinCom report this year.
Great.
Oh, good,
Thank you.
good. The pylon
Great.
chart,
Briggs
yeah,
calls
great.
it the pylon chart.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a good chart.
it is a good
But that,
chart.
yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so
Okay,
there is
go
a
ahead,
lot more
Lindsay.
debt, so there's, another discussion is, do we
Yep.
add more to this fund and like, to
Yeah.
take
Well,
it out
let's-
a little further,
Yeah.
you know? We have over 5 million a year in payments on the middle school through the 2040s, you know, so it's a lot of money.
Yep, yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
Very good.
So in my tenure on FinCom, I've always, we hear the requests that you get as well. Should we support the use of free cash for this noble cause? And I've never had an objective criterion to say, well, how much free cash is the right number? So we took a look at some neighboring communities that are also have AAA bond ratings. So these truly are peers.
Yep,
Are they?
And just to set this straight, this chart shows the combination of free cash plus all reserves as a percentage of the 2024 budget, the town's budget. And you can see Concord at 11% of the budget. Westford tied with us. Belmont and Acton, which are the only two that are lower than that, both had Prop 2.5 overrides last year.
okay.
And I mention that because the other thing to think about with this is how much headroom is there to Prop 2.5, and what would we do if we had a revenue shortfall from one of these other sources? Okay, so the average of the free cash balance of these towns is 11.7%, and the average of the total free cash plus stabilization is 16.3%.
And R11 is the free cash plus stabilization.
Plus the 5 million of
So that
stabilization.
R11
correct.
compares to that 16.3.
Yes.
Correct.
These are
It compares to the 16.3, and keep in mind that that middle school stabilization should be expended within the next few years, right?
Oh,
So looking to find best practices, well, all I can say really is that all of these towns have a story of their own, right?
They're all unique, yeah.
But I wanted to just share with you a little bit of Lexington's. They have a target of 7% for free cash and a policy not to use free cash to reduce for operating expenses or to reduce the next year's tax levy, but instead to move it into a stabilization fund, either the general stabilization fund, which I described earlier, has
Yep.
that goal of covering 30% of the revenue, non-property
Yep.
tax revenue. In our case, if we were to adopt a similar goal, that would be about 20, let's see, what did I come up with here? $20 million, is that right? Hold on, double check my numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we, I'm sorry, so 7% for free cash and 30% of state aid, right, would be about $18 million there. So that's about 13% of the budget. So in total, it's about 20% of the budget if we were to adopt that model. In addition to that, though, these towns, and Lexington is another good example, have capital stabilization funds. And the goal of those, stated goal, is to avoid a bump in the property taxes due to an unplanned capital expense. So if we know that a property, so when they say, we know that 5 years from now, we need a new, say, public safety building.
Let's say that.
Right. We put some money away.
Put it down on the table right now.
We plan it so that it's not a one-time big hit, and we,
Yep.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And so something along that line, wouldn't be, might make sense for Concord as well. Some of these towns that have a lot of cash, like Lincoln has an awful lot of cash.
Yes, they do.
They have earmarked, they know what they're gonna do with it. And their tax rate is, forecastable.
So they're in specific stabilization funds, most of their money?
They have
Lincoln?
large free cash balance as well.
Okay.
But then they have
Okay.
specific stabilization funds for projects that the town is anticipating.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, and now we're going to move to one more slide. So, as Eric mentioned, we've had an initial conversation in the Finance Committee about the need for some benchmarks, and we haven't taken a vote on a recommendation to give to you, but we're thinking that that we will be discussing this Thursday, that the town should aim for a reserve balance, which is a combination of free cash and stabilization funds, of between 15 and 25% of the town's annual budget. Yeah. So it's kind of like having 3 months of salary saved up for an emergency, a rainy day fund kind of thing. Although you're also in that, you have the savings account for your planned replacement of buildings, et cetera. It will reduce the impact of capital projects, which is a stated goal in Lexington of this policy. And it will certainly go a long way to help us maintain our bond rating.
Did the bond agency actually say something about our percentage? What did they say about it,
Well-
outside of it being insufficient or being low? Because it also says there's a lot of mitigating good things in Concord, so.
Yes, certainly. We didn't list the good things as well, you're
Yeah,
right. For one thing, we have a very high percentage of OPEB.
Right, in these
payments,
other
and,
towns, yeah,
so we have
right.
other things that
Yeah.
make us shine. It's just that our cash reserve balances are low relative to
Right.
other communities.
Does
Below
MMA or
average.
anybody have a best practice on sort of just averages? I mean, I know you looked at these AAA, and that's
Yeah.
probably a good place to
10 to
benchmark.
15%.
10 to 15.
MMA's website is 10 to 15%.
So cash plus stabilization? Okay, yeah.
But Wendy, think of, the stabilization is going to vary a lot with the capital project stabilization, with your planning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that you want to have a project that you're funding, right? So, yeah, I get it. No, 15, yeah. It seems like 15% would be minimum that
Right.
you'd want to have, right? And
Right.
That's about 20 million.
Right.
25 feels high, but, got a lot of things to balance.
I'm struck by the fact, though, that to some extent, the appetite for this, if I remember some of the dialogue around this in Concord, varies a little bit with what the interest rate environment is. In a low and dropping interest rate environment, having the town have a lot of money, which the town is really not allowed to invest in anything other than, treasury bills, basically, was that money has to be collected from someplace. It has to be collected from taxpayers, and taxpayers then no longer have access to that money themselves, and they can watch it sit in the town's bank account for a while, or they can hold it until it's asked for from the town for a purpose. And so, my recollection is that often when faced with this same discussion in the past, we've said, when we need it, we'll ask for it, and we'll say why we need it, and ask for it that way, and then try to spend it wisely.
I have two thoughts, because I had the same, I started the same thought. And then I thought, well, but what if receipts fall
Right.
below?
Yeah.
Do we mid-year want to have to have layoffs because receipts have fallen and we cannot change increase our income? The other is that we have only about $3 million of headroom to Prop 2.5 limit.
Yeah. Both fair points.
That is really, really tight, especially compared to this peer group.
Yeah, I think in the environment where the amplitude of uncertainty is increasing and interest rates are, you can get reasonable returns on money that's parked in effect.
Yeah.
It does change the discussion someplace, and it argues for a policy that's a little bit richer. As you pointed out in our past thing, for a number of years, the Finance Committee and select boards, and likewise, let the free cash balance hover above our policy levels, and I think that was part of the thinking there.
Yeah, and that's another reason we're arguing for a big range, too.
Yeah.
So it gives that flexibility
Makes
depending on
sense.
the interest rate environment.
But then you
I
become
like that
vague,
range.
right?
But you have some reasons behind why.
Well,
To me, there's two questions in front of us. One is, how much of free cash do we want to put in stabilization funds? I mean, how much do we want to earmark it for things we know, like Lincoln, and things we know we've got? And the other is, how much do we want to build up our free cash and stabilization funds? And I don't know how to do that, given that, what we heard when we were talking about coming in with a guideline that's below expected inflation, one of the risks we knew we were taking was we were going to have less available for free cash, right? So, yes, we might want to take what we have in free cash and earmark it for specific stabilization funds, but how do we build up free cash?
Great question, Mary. I don't know that we can take action that would lead to a growth of that other than to deny the use of free cash for other purposes. So that is to say, we could say we really, as a town, should have 7 or 7.5% of our budget as free cash, and we should have some money in a general stabilization fund for a recession to cover.
Yep.
Yeah, and if we are above that, then we can use free cash for other purposes. Now, that doesn't cause free cash to rise. And to your first question, how much should be put into reserves? I'd say probably not until we're comfortably above 7.5%, which is right about where we are right now.
Yeah. But as I mentioned, I think in the Finance Committee meeting, we do want some flexibility in free cash for expenses that don't fit into our operating budget like we're seeing this year. So we do need to have some, a reserve available to us for things that are one-time expenses that are not recurring, that we don't want to bump up our operating budget to a level that we're stuck with from then on, right? They're really one-time things, like this year for example, for our MCI consulting, we're asking for free cash for that, or we think we are. And this is a one-time thing. And so to me, this is a perfect example of where we should have some free cash available to us as a reserve for these one-time things so that we don't build up our operating budget on, because that never goes down.
Yeah, I would say that is the definition of what free cash is for.
Exactly,
It's one-time
exactly.
things.
Yes.
However, the sort of 7.5% is what you want to be carrying for that purpose.
Yeah.
And so if we don't have My other comment, and I would just say, thinking as I would if this was me at home,
Yep.
is, well, is there something we could not do? Or secondly, is there, in this case, is there something that we can surplus or that we don't necessarily?
Got it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a healthy discussion. I mean, it's about, this is where the art comes in, right? Not the science, right? You got to figure out how you want to maintain these balances, right? Between the free cash and the stabilization and the taxes and the expenses and, the projects, right? And you got to put it all in and say, okay, how do we want to balance this out? I mean, 15 to me seems like a very reasonable starting point. I mean, I think then you got to look at, are there arguments to go beyond that? Because if you do go beyond that, I mean, you got to get it from somewhere, right?
Right.
So it's a pay me now or pay me later kind of equation that you're always trying to balance.
That's right.
So in terms of next steps, our
steps.
intention is to bring this to the full finance committee at our meeting on Thursday and ideally align on a recommendation.
Great.
Again, acknowledging you're the chief policy-making body in town, we can bring that back to you.
Great.
We can work with you in assisting in drafting a policy
Yep.
if we get to that point.
That sounds great.
And
Very
one more
good.
thing I think we should do together is take the town's capital plan, that, the forward-looking capital plan.
Yes.
And carry it down to the pile-on chart.
Yeah, it
right?
would be great to see
And
that.
see how we can smooth things out.
Yes.
Together with reserves.
Yep.
So that, like they stated in the town of Lexington, to avoid these big bumps in property
rolling
taxes that
Yep.
Very
happen.
good.
Right,
Very good.
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
I would
Great.
suggest that that's a great thing to include. Any major capital project should probably have their version of that chart showing what the impact of their project is layered into all the other debt. I
Yes.
think that makes a lot of sense. It used to be common.
Yeah, no, and we would start them before the project started.
Right.
Like the CCHS one started before the project.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so we could start one now.
Well, thank you for looking
Great.
and bringing this to our attention. We'll,
It's great.
we'll make headway.
Thank you.
Next steps. Thank you very much. Okay. Next thing is the Historical Commission. Who, I don't,
Nancy,
are
I
you
think.
here, Nancy, for that?
Yep.
Okay. Is Alan online?
I am, I'm here.
Great.
Yep. Thank you for having us. Alan Bogosian, Historical Commission, along with Nancy Frisella Lee. We're here before you to recommend the removal of inaccurate marker above the Brewster's Hill Road street sign. There's the little round, white round piece. I'm going to turn it over to Nancy Frisella Lee because she's done a lot of research on the street signs in town, and knows this one very well as well as the rest of the ones that she's worked on. So, Nancy, the floor is yours.
Hi, this should be quick and easy. I'm Nancy Frisella Lee, 140 Walden Street. So yes, you might be familiar with these little oval signs that you see above street signs. They were put up, I think in 1995, 1996, when the Historical Commission implemented something that we called Historic Street Sign Program. It was short-lived. So they put up these signs, and I think the Historical Commission didn't forget about them, but it didn't go on very, they didn't add more to them. So this sign is on Brewster's Hill Road, across from Walden Woods, where Brewster's Hill is. And it's just inaccurate. That's why we want it taken down. It's very straightforward. It should say Brister Freeman, not Scipio Freeman. Scipio Freeman was a different person, and the confusion stems from Thoreau's book, Walden. And yeah, I don't know if you have any questions, and I also just wanted to point out,
Mhm.
maybe for fun, that Bristers Hill Road, the street sign itself has a little inaccuracy. It should be Bristers.
Apostrophe.
Apostrophe, yeah.
But
Apostrophe.
we're not going for that. We just think that the sign should be taken down. Right.
Very good.
I hope it should just be a quick.
Yeah.
It should be simple.
Yes.
Very simple,
Yes.
very simple.
straight.
Yeah.
But you're,
It's very
just a
simple.
simple
Yeah.
question, but you're ultimately not looking to replace it
Yeah.
with a new,
No, I'm doing, for the Historical Commission, and I've been doing this for a long time, I'm looking at all the monuments and markers in town, just kind of doing a survey of them, and maybe sometime we will recommend that they should be taken down. I've heard some comments that they're not safe because they're a distraction to drivers. That's not a specialty of, I don't know, that's not an issue that I am, informed about, but some of them are really dirty, some of them have cracks. So I think we'll have some further discussions and maybe recommendations from DPW.
Who takes this down, Nancy? Is it DPW?
Assuming it's DPW,
So,
wouldn't it be?
yeah.
Okay. Have you
I
spoken
would if
to
I
them?
could, but I don't know
Yeah.
how to do that.
We have not spoken to them yet.
You,
No.
I think Megan
Megan.
has.
Yes, I think Shannon was working on this.
Okay.
And she has been in touch with the Public Works Director, Alan Cathcart.
Yep.
And since we're just talking about this one sign,
Yep.
they indicated that they would be able to assist with removal for this example, if the board
Great.
is interested in.
Great.
And this is not in a historic district or anything?
No,
so-
No.
it's not.
No.
No, we checked that.
All right.
So.
I also have ladders on my truck too.
And big scissors, huh? Okay.
I'd be curious to hear if this really is a safety concern. I thought I read that in the materials from Alan,
I
only
put that
because.
in my letter, because
okay.
we talked about that at our regular meeting, and I think Ann Clifford mentioned something about that. So I should have said they're thought to be unsafe.
Okay.
I don't know if that's really, but she did make the comment, because she has experience with signage, that if this program were to propose today, that it wouldn't go through
Yeah.
with an approval, so.
It's an important historic marker. It'd be great to put these back up if we had them and they were correct, but, because we've taken several of them down.
We're looking
Right.
at all of our interpretive signage,
Yep.
and now, in this moment in our history, and looking at the best practice ways
Yeah.
of doing it, and
Yep.
probably this isn't best practice.
Yeah.
Interpretive signage, and that's all. And since this sign and this whole program was initiated, there are several markers on Bristers Hill, so Brister Freeman
okay.
is getting attention, and hopefully his life story will be getting more attention. I went to the wonderful quilt exhibition
Yes,
this
yep.
weekend, and one of my favorite quilts, there was a woman who had read Elise Lemire's book, Black Walden, and she was really taken by this story, and so her quilt is about his story.
Yeah.
And she even dyed her fabric with natural dyes, and she,
It's amazing.
every part of the quilt was really thoughtful and thought through, so it was
Yeah,
amazing
I
to
saw
see
that. It was
such a-
fantastic.
Good. It's
great.
good that we get these two people
Yeah.
stories straight. Okay.
Right.
Do we need a motion?
Thank you.
Do we want to take any comment?
Probably. Do we need a
Do
motion?
we have any motion?
We have a motion.
Okay. Well,
No, we have no comment.
Move to approve the recommendation to remove the inaccurate Scipio Brister Oval historical marker at Bristers Hill Road.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you for
Thank you,
bringing that to our
Nancy.
attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, great. Moving right along, the chair's report. I'll be brief. The land use matrix that we approved last week, I did check to see if we could make the Finance Committee member an ex officio member. And in fact, I got confirmation from Carmen that Finance Committee members cannot be voting members. So I decided to just put them in as a liaison and hope that the chair will let them actively participate as non-voting. So those letters went out the very next day to the chairs of the committees that were asking them to nominate a representative, and I gave them until the end of April to do so. So that's in play. I want to make a call out for the Minuteman Vocational School rep. We know that Steve Ledoux is retiring soon after town meeting. He just said town meeting. And I have a person that I'm, I said that, I know. We have a person that I'm aware of that I think would be a strong candidate, but I'm also making a call out to anyone else who thinks that they would like to be a rep to the Minuteman Vocational School. The other thing I want to point out at last week's Chair's Breakfast, Dottie Bernard from the Board of Health brought copies of this Community Health Needs Assessment Summary Report that they did on based on a survey. It's very interesting. If anybody wants to look at this, to just give you a feel for what people feel in town are mental health or just health issues, it's a good read. And then finally, I want to remind us that we do have hearings to go to as a select board that are outside of our normal select board schedule. And that's about all I have.
Okay, I just have a couple of things with the understanding that you got maybe a full report last week with the written report. So we did have a meeting last week in front of the Recreation Commission on the Doug White Field. I know at least 3 of you were there.
Yes.
And we had 45 to 50 in total between in-person and the Zoom audience. I thought it was a good meeting. We had a presentation from the consultant, the engineering group. They talked through the different options, the timetable, the costs associated with the different options. There were a number of questions that were outstanding. We're in the process of collecting answers or drafting answers to the questions that were outstanding. We have an internal project team meeting next week with representation from the Rec Commission, the school, the CC Fields, and we'll talk about the schedule and how we're going to push out the responses to those questions. So I did want to mention that. I know you've heard multiple times this evening already about the 250th committee. We and the work associated with that, we're 3 weeks or so out. I would ask if the public could be patient with us as we work to support the 250th over the next 3 to 4 weeks. It's something, I'm not sure we have a town employee that doesn't spend a portion of every week, and some spend a portion of every day for days on end, months on end, working on this. We're in the home stretch, and as you heard this evening, things are well in hand. But it will become even more difficult for us over the next couple of weeks to ready for that event. And many of the same staff are also preparing for the town meeting public hearings that are happening just before that event as well. So those were really the only 2 things that I wanted to mention to you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, on our agenda, liaison reports. Any questions on the liaison report that Wendy and I?
I can just add, though, because the school committee had a campus subcommittee meeting, and they are gearing up for their PR campaign around amenities building, and I think each of us, along with all the other groups that actually use the field, will be a recipient of a letter requesting their support for the amenities building. So they're getting the word out, for sure.
Okay, good. Thank you. Mark, do you have anything?
Sure. Most of my updates are really from today. Although we did, and they relate to MCI Concord specifically, just going through the week. Last Tuesday, though, there was a very productive meeting with the chair of MCI Concord, of the advisory board, along with town staff, the Department of Transportation, the DCAM representative, and Public Works, specifically to try to understand where they are in the rotary design, the extent to which the change of having MCI no longer be there affects the thinking of the Department of Transportation on the Rotary. So they have assigned a project manager to this. It's early days, so we don't see the project on the website, but the DOT is committed to meeting with the town on a roughly quarterly basis, and looking at alternative designs. They are focused primarily on improving the connectivity, which means, you know, how well you can get across town, basically, and reducing the congestion, which means how well you can get through town with the designs. And they're looking at the designs that some of the leading designs that they had for 2008. It was a very good meeting in that we were able to, as the town, communicate to the Department of Transportation some of the things that have changed from our perspective, like the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, like the need for a water treatment facility in the vicinity, some of these things that they could factor into where they might site recite a roadway. There was some dialogue about how potentially the MCI property availability could facilitate an easier construction project. Because you can imagine reconstructing the Rotary in any way, shape, or form is going to be disruptive for a good long period of time, and if there's anything. So some of those ideas are beginning to be discussed at the level that they should be discussed with our transportation planning department, talking directly to DOT, and I thought that was very good, and that was facilitated by the MCI Advisory Board to get that going.
Is that the right, I mean, because this will impact all of Concord, not just MCI, right? They're talking about connectivity along the whole corridor.
Yeah, and
so is the MCI Advisory Board the right?
I think it's a great place to get started, because what it did was it provided a two-way flow of information where the Department of Transportation was able to talk about what their priorities are,
Yeah.
and they were able to be informed at a technical level, you know, sharing technical information about what is going on traffic-wise. So they've agreed to share new traffic study information with us, and our traffic information will also go there. So I think it's a good working level. It's not going to solve the question of what the community preferences ultimately look like, but I think it's an unprecedented level of cooperation and openness about the very large issue of how does traffic get solved in that area. I mean, DOT is going to do a project there sooner or later, and we're at the table early, being able to discuss town priorities with them, and that's what's important.
the town
That's all a good
engineers-
thing.
Yeah.
That's all a good thing. I'm just wondering if there are other ways we should be connecting with them besides the MCI Advisory Board.
Potentially, but I think that in this case, we're talking about the property immediately in a
For now, we are.
yeah, very small vicinity, yeah.
But-
And that's what their project scope is also for the Rotary.
Oh,
So they're thinking
yes.
about the Rotary, the bridge over the Azabet River.
Oh, they're not thinking about the corridor to the east.
No, this is specific to that intersection
Okay,
and bridge.
okay.
Okay. Continuing on MCI, the consultant is engaged with, the advisory board met today. We saw a preliminary schedule which is going to be adjusted slightly, so I don't feel comfortable actually putting it up lest somebody believe it's exactly cast in concrete. But the major public outreach workshops are going to take place in the last week of April. So as soon as we get over Patriots Day, we're going to be heavily into this planning, and also in the last week of May. So the dates that were thrown out for those large public visioning workshops
Yep.
are on Wednesdays of those weeks. That would be April 28th and May 26th. There will be other themed conversations that will take place in early May, including there was some discussion about when the best time to have a housing groups engagement, which looks like we would like to do that after we've had at least one major public workshop so that people can hear something about what the public has to say, and then have a more focused housing conversation. So think something like the first week of May on that.
For housing.
For housing,
Okay.
yeah. The website is going to launch in mid-April, so we'll be looking for that soon. So that'll be an opportunity for people who want to write, who want to read things and engage with that. Also, there'll be a meeting next week where the discovery phase will be presented to the MCI Advisory Board. So what the consultants have discovered about existing conditions and beginning to do that. And lastly, the last thing I'll talk about here is we did have a fairly long discussion about funding. As we know, our legislative delegation secured 2 earmarks last year totaling $725,000. We have begun to access the first one. I guess I'll just put it this way. The state is trying to make them serial, and that's problematic for us in terms of how we need to spend the money. So we're working with our legislative delegation to try to get them to unlock, is the word we're using, the second one sooner, so that we can use it as part of particularly as part of the wastewater planning effort.
They
And
both expire on June 30th, though?
Right?
they do, which is the problem, because,
Okay.
so
Okay.
Yeah.
that was an extensive conversation. The thinking is that we will also be making a request to our legislators to ask for an earmark for funds that we might anticipate spending in FY '26. Prospects for that actually coming through are fairly dim, but you don't get what you don't ask for. So we're going to ask for that anyway, and then the board will engage with coming up with a number, probably at its April meeting, for the final ask for the free cash transfer for the article, which will be the backup, hopefully backup monies that we may need
The
for
warrant article.
this, for the warrant article. Any questions about MCI?
So who's coming up with that number? The advisory board or
The
the
advisory
consultants?
board. So basically what we're looking at is based on the discovery work and the discussions that we're having. It would be continuation of public outreach, potentially extension of the planning work if it's not quite ready, and precursors. Also, we know that the zoning, which is estimated in our current, was in the current scope of the RFP, is 100,000. So it'll be at least 100. And then other work that can be specifically identified for FY '26 on that. I'm done.
Any other?
Okay. Just quickly, so thank you, Mark. Quickly, I was also at the Rec Commission meeting, and so it was just good, just adding a little bit to what Kerry said. It was nice to see the cost estimates for the turf replacement would be coming in within the budget that the CC Fields has set aside, right? So I think that was nice to see where the numbers were coming in. And then just on a lighter note, Mrs. Gardella turned 100, Frances
Yeah.
Gardella,
Oh, yes.
kindergarten teacher.
Oh, yes.
She was my kindergarten teacher at Harvey Wheeler, so if she's listening, thank you for what you did. 50 years ago at Harvey Wheeler, so yes, so that was fun to see.
That's good.
Yeah, that is nice.
That's nice. That is nice.
People stick around in Concord, don't they?
Some do, yeah.
Yeah.
Some leave and come back.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you.